So picture this. You've got ancient mystics from over 2,000 years ago on one side, and modern theoretical physicists working in today's most advanced labs on the other. On the surface, they literally seem worlds apart. But what if I told you they're actually describing the exact same universe? Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to bridge what seems like a massive gap between ancient Eastern texts and the hard mathematical laws of modern science. I mean, what do ancient chariots and modern quantum physics labs actually have in common? It sounds like a completely impossible connection, doesn't it? You've got the epic imagery of ancient chariots on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, up against the, sterile whiteboards of a theoretical physics lab. Okay, let's dive into this, because the crossover between these two seemingly opposite worlds is going to completely change how you view your own mind and the universe around you. To really wrap our heads around this connection, we actually have to look at some of the greatest minds in modern science, guys like J. Robert Oppenheimer and the founding fathers of quantum mechanics. They were deeply obsessed with these ancient texts, specifically the Bhagavad Gita. When Albert Einstein was grappling with the bizarre interconnectedness of the universe, he famously called it spooky action at a distance. And as we'll see, that very concept was vividly described thousands of years before we even have the math to prove it. Here's a quick look at our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with ancient meets modern science, cover the 8 material elements, explore the higher conscious nature, dive into thermodynamics in the Gita, and wrap up with practical lessons for daily life. I promise we'll logically bridge these esoteric Sanskrit concepts right into the physics lab and into your actual day-to-day routine. Section 1. Ancient meets modern science. Let's just briefly set the stage here, on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where Chapter 7 of the Bhagavad Gita unfolds as this incredible philosophical guide to reality. Moving right along to Section 2, the 8 material elements, also known as Aparā-Prakṛti. This is all about defining the lower nature that makes up our physical reality. So in Chapter 7 of the Gita, set against this massive moral crisis on a battlefield, reality gets split into two. First up is Aparā-Prakṛti, that lower material nature. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it lists gross physical elements we totally recognize, earth, water, fire, air, and space, alongside elements we normally wouldn't think of as physical. Look at those last 3, mind, intellect, and ego. In this ancient framework, your thoughts, your cognitive processing, even your sense of self are categorized merely as matter. They're physical elements, literally just as material as a rock or a glass of water. Let's zoom in on one of these elements, space, or kham in Sanskrit. It's described as an invisible, all-pervading element that provides accommodating space for everything to exist, yet it entirely escapes simple detection. Now, think about this from a modern scientific perspective. Back in 1933, astrophysicist Fritz Zwicky realized that visible galaxies didn't actually have enough mass to hold themselves together. He inferred there had to be this invisible, unseen mass keeping the universe intact. Sound familiar? It's what we now call dark matter. Modern science literally spends millions searching for this elusive dark matter, which perfectly mirrors that ancient concept of kham. Which brings us to Section 3, the higher conscious nature, or Aparā-Prakṛti. We're shifting focus here to the superior energy that actually animates all this material stuff. Because think about it, if the mind and intellect are just material elements, what's actually pulling the strings? Well, that's the higher nature. On the left, you've got the 8 material elements. They are constantly transforming, right? Always going through these endless cycles of creation and destruction. But on the right, the higher nature is consciousness itself. It's the eternal, unchanging life force that unifies and animates the world. So the lower material nature is basically just the vehicle, and the higher conscious nature, that's the driver. And this brilliantly illustrates the concept using a really vivid analogy straight from the source material. A necklace. So imagine a necklace. You see the individual beads, right? Those represent the transforming, varied forms of the 8 material elements. But running through every single bead, holding them together in one unified structure, is an invisible string. That string is the higher conscious nature. It connects all those disparate pieces of matter into one cohesive reality. All right, Section 4, Thermodynamics and the Gita. Get ready because we are about to map these ancient philosophical concepts directly onto the hard laws of physics. Let's just walk through this conceptual mapping because it really organizes some heavy scientific and philosophical data. Look at the Gita's teaching on the eternal, indestructible nature of the soul. That maps perfectly to the first law of thermodynamics. Then, the teachings on the mind's natural tendency toward confusion,
That aligns right with the second law of thermodynamics, which we know as entropy. And finally, that concept of a unified cosmic consciousness is beautifully mirrored by quantum entanglement.
Let's break down that first law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, it only transforms. Imagine burning a log of wood. To us, the wood seems to just disappear, right? But the energy it held isn't destroyed at all. It simply transforms into heat, light, and ash. The total energy in the universe remains exactly the same. The ancient texts teach that the higher nature, this conscious life force, acts exactly like this. It is totally indestructible. It simply discards old physical forms and transitions into new ones, without ever actually ceasing to exist. Now, what about the second law, entropy? In physics, this is the measure of disorder. Left to their own devices, physical systems naturally drift toward chaos. Think of a teenager's messy bedroom. Without constant, deliberate energy and effort put into clean it up, that room naturally just gets messier and more disorganized over time. Well, the exact same applies to our lower nature, specifically the material element of the mind. Left completely unchecked and constantly bombarded by external desires and worries, our minds naturally drift toward anxiety, confusion, and burnout. That is mental entropy in action. Let's move to and see how this builds into an even grander scientific concept. Looking at the striking visual, it represents the universal cosmic form, where all beings and planets are woven into one deeply connected, single, unified whole. In modern physics, we call this quantum entanglement. It's that mind-bending phenomenon where particles remain deeply connected, instantly influencing each other regardless of physical distance. It's the exact same thing Einstein called spooky action. You guys, these ancient texts recognized a deeply interconnected universal consciousness literally millennia before quantum labs even existed. How wild is that? Okay, let's ground this. Section 5, Practical Lessons for Daily Life. Let's turn these massive cosmic theories into practical psychological tools for your everyday well-being. Because, it's fascinating to talk about quantum physics and ancient texts, but how does this actually help you on a random Tuesday morning? Well, remember that the mind is just a material element subject to entropy. It naturally wants to drift into chaos. But by recognizing that your true essence is actually the higher observing consciousness, you can detach from that noise. So the crucial point is, you are essentially building a mental thermos. Think about it. A thermos keeps the inside temperature perfectly stable, regardless of the chaos happening outside. By practicing this detachment, you block out the external chaos and manage your internal energy, becoming a highly efficient, perfectly balanced system. I want to leave you with this provocative thought. What if your anxiety, your stress, and your burnout aren't actually character flaws, but simply physics equations? What if they are literally just the natural entropy of your material mind? By recognizing the difference between those chaotic material elements and your steady, higher consciousness, you have the actual power to restore your internal balance. So, how will you manage your internal energy today? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible universe both outside and inside of you.